Record. Good afternoon or good day, and welcome to this presentation. We're excited to be here. The title of our presentation is Lost in Translation. I'm Luke Jankovic. I'm the EVP of Higher Ed at MEMS, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Laster. I'm the Vice President of Employer and Career Services at Purdue Global.
A little bit about MEMS. If you don't know, we're a labor market data company focused on the intersection of people, education, and work. We want to help individuals find work and the education needed to get that work. We want to help companies find the talent they need, and we want to help institutions and other learning providers know and fill the education needs along the way to make that whole process work better. These are some of the schools we work with relevant to the UPSIA group. Jen, tell us about Purdue Global.
Purdue Global is a fantastic place for our students. It's dedicated to helping adult learners get to the next step in their career. About 60% of our population is over the age of 30. Average age is about 35, 36. We're a little over 60% female, about 30% military affiliated. We have a lot of people who are coming in with transfer credit, and they want to get in, learn what they need to learn, and get to the next step of their career. A lot of times they promise friends or family they are going to do this, and they're a little nervous sometimes, so they need some support and some affirmation that they're making the right career choices along the way.
Awesome. So what we wanted to talk about today was this problem of being lost in translation and how to better translate between what's happening on campus and what's happening in the world of work. For the traditional learner, that challenge is typically focused on how does what the person's learning in the classroom translate into the workplace? You know, how is this class relevant? How is this program or degree relevant? And why am I doing quadratic equations? That kind of thing. But to Jen's point, more particularly, we think there's a more significant translation challenge for the non-traditional learner. They've got this task of how to translate their past learning and experience into a set of potential opportunities of what they could do based on what they do know, and what gaps do they have between where they are and the accumulation of skills and experiences they have and where they might want to advance from a career perspective. So we need to help the individual do that work, but then we also need to understand how that might map up against the offerings that an institution provides, either as a degree format or a micro-credential, in whatever format that could exist in to fill the gap. So lost in translation, we know that it's hard to translate between people, education, and work, particularly for non-traditional learners. One way to think about that is we've got people, we've got jobs, we've got education. We typically think about people as a bundle of degrees and past job titles, degrees or certifications or any form of work experience. I know for Jen, many of her students don't necessarily have a degree when they come to them. On the job side, we've got things like job titles or occupation classifications to understand what's happening in work. And on the education side, we have these other sort of higher categories too, like degrees or credentials or programs. And in each of those circles, there's really not a lot of detail if you're trying to match across these three different spheres. We use systems today like SOC codes, which is the standard occupation classification from the Department of Labor. These big job categories like computer software developer and welder. So we can use those to kind of translate across, but oftentimes that's not sufficient because what actually happens in the job is significantly different than that title. And what's happening in the role is more important than the category. On the education side, we've got some data about what's being taught, but we categorize that from like a secondary data perspective in terms of SIP codes, which are the classification of instructional programs from the Department of Ed. And that's another system of categories, a hierarchical system of categories, and we don't really know what's being taught in those programs beyond a general name. So if we're going to solve the translation problem, we're positing that we need a new way to do it, because these structures, these categories that we've used over time aren't specific or flexible enough to meet the challenges inherent in helping individual non-traditional learners get the right amount of learning to upskill or reskill in their career. So what is our different approach, or what's our proposed different approach to solve this translation problem? Ta-da! Well, let me put it this way. The way I've described the world in the sort of current system is a hierarchical approach. So you start with defining work or an individual based on a category or a job title or an occupation, and then you work down and you fill in, okay, for this job, for this occupation, these are the skills, competencies, credentials, whatever, that are needed to accomplish this role. That's the world we've been living in. The approach that we're proposing is not to look at categories, set a category and then define it, but instead to look at how skills in the market network and relate and emerge and shift. So we're looking not at things defined by category on the left, sort of a classic occupation taxonomy or job title taxonomy, but instead we want to look at the ways that skills network and relate and use those relationships to define the roles themselves and what's happening in the jobs. You might ask how we do this. Well, we're a labor market data company, and we have hundreds of millions of job postings from employers about what they're looking for. So we can see the skills that exist regardless of job title or occupation, and use the skills in the postings. And for us, skills are things like credentials and hard skills and soft skills. It's sort of a general term. And we can see how those skills relate and co-occur out in the marketplace, and use those relationships instead to define the roles instead of what a specific job title or occupation might be saying. It gives us a lot more information about what's actually happening in that role out in the world of work. So we're using a bottom-up, emergent approach to define work. We're defining by relationship, not by category. And we're not throwing the categories out entirely. We're just working from a different direction, so we have more handles to translate individual roles and educational content with. So on the one of the strengths of the skills approach is you end up seeing how, regardless of job title or role, how many skills are transferable and cut across roles. Effectively, we've created a skill map of the labor market, and you can draw a circle around a specific space and see a lot more information about transferability than you can if you're just looking at categories, when you can't see the overlap between a marketing manager and a salesperson. You can when you look at the skills. So our proposed approach is to use skills as this connecting language to translate people, education, and employment into one language so we can better translate across those different spheres, and in doing so, more effectively and efficiently highlight and find opportunities for employers, for schools, and for individual students. Skills, it's all the rage. This system is, unlike the category system, is specific. It's specific to individuals. It's specific to jobs, to particular roles. Can be specific to educational offerings, and it's far more flexible and transferable. We're kind of looking at skills as a fundamental building block that we can help understand how one role is built out of specific skills, and for an individual, then show them how their skills can be rebuilt to make and fit that role. So the level of flexibility is significantly higher. So how are we doing this? Well, this work is powered by our technology. We have really world-class ways to read text, to read job postings and employment profiles and even educational content, and surface from within those the skills that are being asked for. And we're also able to identify new skills and emerging skills really rapidly. So our technology is powering this. And then below the technology is working on our labor market data, what's happening trend-wise in employment. We have that for all of the US, but then furthermore, we have this really rich set of job postings from employers and an analogous set of social professional profiles about people at work. So we're using those data sets and servicing the skills within them to sort of do a lot of this analysis and work. But what can you actually do with it once you have it? We're talking about that non-traditional learner and the challenge of translation. So if we focus back on that in an individual use case, and we can see some real benefit from this approach. On the left side of this visual, you can see in our hierarchical job categories, we often have a linear sort of nice pathway that an individual traverses to advance in their career. I'm more and more convinced that the exception is actually the rule. Most people I talk to when I say, hey, tell me about your career path, they're like, oh, it's crazy. I'm a unicorn. And it turns out most rooms are full of unicorns, meaning most rooms are full of individuals who've had a unique, serendipitous and non-linear career adventure, to put it that way. So how do we create a data infrastructure, an advising infrastructure that actually maps that world instead of what we think is a world of nice, clean ladders and transitions? That's what we're proposing on the right. So with the skills approach, we can understand and see the transferability of skills. We can see how one individual actually sensibly is moving from a role in marketing or sales into another one based on the skills inherent in both of those roles. And we can begin to advise individuals about how to fill the skill gaps between where they are and great opportunities that are nearby that might not be intuitive in the structured world on the left side. So what we set out to do with our friends at Purdue Global was test against this idea of creating a personalized learning path for a non-traditional student in particular. So there were three things we were trying to accomplish. The first is we wanted to see if we could define an individual's unique skill shape. So can we, through a process, meaningfully come up with a shape of skills for a specific individual? The second was to take that shape of skills and map it, plot it against that skill-based labor market universe and see what new in-demand opportunities are closer to it. And which next steps or skill increments, additional skills that the individual could accrete, which ones would really pay off that presented unique and compelling labor market improvements. The third was based on those gaps, could we recommend specific education? Could we create an infrastructure for personalized learning recommendations? So here's how we viewed the process. From an individual user side, we wanted to know what their goal was. Do you want to reskill or upskill? Do you want to switch careers, et cetera? We wanted to know about the past education they had completed or not completed, because we could use what we know about people with degrees and the skills they now have to triangulate some of what that individual had learned. We wanted to know about the skills that they possessed based on the past work they'd done. And then generally about their interests, what they were trying to accomplish, similar to goals. Those inputs we hypothesized we could feed into a software engine that utilized this model, this skills-based map of the world that I've described, plus a lot of demand data, and importantly, skill-type curriculum, which is something we haven't talked about. And this process would then produce results, career fields and areas ranked by demand that we could recommend back to that student, back to that learner, interested student, doesn't have to necessarily be a student at that moment. What areas were closest to them that were growing and in demand, and which skill gaps they had to fill to better fit those roles? And importantly, which educational offerings at the institution could help fill that, be it a specific course or a program or a micro-credential or a degree. So that was the process we endeavored that was our sort of hypothetical process that we had a bunch of good evidence would work. We knew we had some strength to execute here. So we went down the path with Purdue Global to see how this would really work. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Jen. I'm going to mute myself too, Jen.
Thanks, Luke. So just to give you an idea as well, at Purdue Global, we have micro-credentials, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. We even have a DNP and an EJD degree. So we've got the gamut, and our students are coming to us from all different levels of experience. We have students that own their own companies or work in the C-suite, all the way to people who have only worked hourly roles. So as you can imagine, we needed to customize and really take a good look at what was going to meet our students' needs. So before we embarked on using this with our students, as Luke mentioned, we went through an activity where we looked at our curriculum and parsed it into skills. And that obviously is an interesting exercise for you to kind of see how you're delivering on those real needs of employers and what the labor market is asking of your graduates. So it was an interesting exercise, which has led to stronger matches for our students when they take this skills match assessment, because it's keyed into what the labor market's looking for and tied to our curriculum that is delivering those outcomes. So when a student enters our site, they get to see if they want to just explore new paths, decide if they're going to level up in their career, if they're just looking at job opportunities, or just want to learn a little bit more about the opportunities ahead of them. So we want to meet students at their needs, so we offer a few different options. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that a student enters in their education. So some people might only have completed high school and this is their first experience in college. Other people, as you can see here, I loaded my master's and my bachelor's degrees. People can add in different certifications, micro-credentials, anything you've got, which helps build that engine of specific opportunities for that student. So they can add in all their education and then go to the next slide and add in their skills. And I think the interesting thing about skills, as Luke mentioned, it's a jungle gym of skills out there when people are going through their career. Not everything is linear anymore. And so the opportunity to gain various skills through different experiences is really important. And obviously, we want to make sure people are comfortable sharing the skills they have. If it's something where they think they have it, we'd advise them not to say they have it today, but instead it could be a focus area for the future. So there's a few different ways students can load this. They can have it extracted from their resume, which is super easy. They can look it up by job title with suggested skills for those jobs, because a lot of times you might forget some of the things that you've done with various job titles. You can look at category or by name. You can also look by education. So there's lots of different opportunities. As you can see here, I typed 67 different skills to my experience level, and I can then also key in on the ones that I want to add. So maybe I want to add some additional administrative experience or some financial experience. I can add in those skills to take me to the next slide, which is going to help me understand what offerings key into my individual needs as a learner. So as you can see here, my matches had to do with education administration. So knock on wood, I'm in the right career. And human resources as well. So I could learn a little bit more about these different programs we offer at Purdue Global. So if you look at the next area, it then gets into the detail of the degrees that might be a match for me. So it might be a degree, it might be a master's degree, it might be an EJD, it might be a micro-credential in a new skill that I'm interested in. Maybe I want to learn a little bit more about social media and just want to add a micro-credential. So there's lots of different opportunities. The really cool thing is I can key into all of these different programs of study and learn a little bit more, see my matches, see what I want to learn and how it's delivered. But then also, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's job postings. So I'm learning about the jobs that tie to my interests and opportunities that could be available to me as a result of my additional education. So this is a great way for students to gain information at the point of entry. Instead of saying, I'm picking a degree because it sounds good, they know that it's tied to the skills they have, the skills they want, and they understand the deliverables that should happen in the job market as a result of gaining all that additional skills and education. Our students at Purdue Global also have an opportunity to get feedback on their skills as they journey through with us, through their faculty. So they can also look at this report later and add additional skills and see the difference in jobs as they're pursuing through their programs of study, which is an interesting feature for people to really learn and grow. They can think about different electives, they can think about different concentrations, and obviously build an opportunity that's customized to them that leads towards the career that they're shooting for. So with that, I think we're at the end of our session. One other thing that we have been doing as well, and MC's really helped us with this as well, is really looking at skills in relation to transfer credit. So one other thing to think about is, are you looking at all those different opportunities through professional certifications? We just did an analysis of one of the latest Google certificate sets out there. We've also analyzed job descriptions to see if there's possible prior learning credit for someone in a leadership type of role. So through the skills tagging and the analysis of skills to our curriculum, it's helping our students gain as much prior learning credit as they can when they enter the university, saving them time and money while they're going to school. So that's also helped us as well. So thanks, MC.
So Jen already mentioned a few of these things. There's a lot that's come from this work. To your point about translating curriculum into a common skills language, then you have a structured data set about what you're teaching by course, by program, and you can use that to assess transferability, right, between two things, and skills becomes this measure of cross relevance, which was a surprise, I think, to all of us. That be kind of a cool use case. The big picture is we are excited with the results that we've been able to kind of accomplish what we set out to do, which is define an individual based on skills in a way that allows them to see the next steps in their path and how a school could help them advance along that path. And in doing so, have an infrastructure to do that that's more scalable than just, you know, a really savvy couple of counselors or advisors, right? So how do you do that, but do it at scale? Do it in a way that you don't that works across the institution. So super excited about the results so far. The other thing mentioned here is the market demand side. I'm just going to go back to this idea of curriculum by skill. So if you understand what you're teaching in your programs, we can also use our labor market data to compare that against what's being sought in the market and do some really interesting comparisons about skills that are very relevant to the labor market. Well, looking at the skill shape of a program, we can say, these are the skills you're teaching that are most in demand. These are the ones that are not. And these are ones that you might consider teaching based on the labor market relevant to the skill set you are teaching. So it's an interesting way to keep the content of programs and courses up to date, which is a challenging task. With that, I think we're going to take questions, but we're going to take questions in the future when people view this and we monitor them in a couple weeks. So thank you everybody for your time and for your attention. Jen, thank you so much. And thank you for partnering with us on really working to solve this translation problem. It's a big deal. And I think we've made some material progress. So way to go. And thank you. Any other thoughts before we close?
No, thank you. And thanks for hosting us today. We appreciate the opportunity. Have a good day.
Have a great day.